It's probably going to take about 30 seconds to come through. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. We'll be talking about the Open Records portal, and I hope you can all hear me. This is kind of a new thing. It's only the second time we've used Google Hangouts, so if you have questions, then let us know. There should be a chat. Let's see. Okay, so I am going to get started. All right, so my name is Renee Wilson. I am the Open Records Portal Administrator, and I am joined here by Nova Dubovic and Kendra Yates, and they will be giving parts of the presentation a little later. All right, so let's just jump right in. So the Open Records portal came from legislation that was a couple years ago in Senate Bill 70, and it modified the Open Utah website to include online grammar requests. I'm going to show you the code. We don't need to read it, but this is the code. If you'll notice, let's see, I have a pen and laser here, so let me pick my laser. Aha, here's my laser. Here, the main part I want to point out is the Open Records portal serves as a point of access for grammar requests. And right now it's for all local agencies. So let me give you a brief overview of the site, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. Hang on just a second. Let me make sure this is broadcasting right. So it's not showing. Okay, I'm not entirely certain what you are seeing at this moment, so I'm going to exit out of this and just make sure that I am broadcasting the correct thing. Hold on just a moment. Okay, hopefully now you can see my screen. And let's put it back to the slideshow. And now, okay, you should be able to see the slides now. Okay. Let's just do this then. Okay, so sorry about that, folks. Like I said, it's our second time using Google Hangouts. It's always an interesting experience using new technology, as I'm sure you know, which is kind of the point of the Open Records portal. All right, so let me give you a brief overview of the site. The address is openrecords.utah.gov. This is what it looks like right now. Let me show you just a couple of things that I would like you to know about. One is down here at the bottom are some links to help you. One is the Help Center, and that just has a bunch of different articles, how-tos on how to do things, and we are adding to that constantly. The next is the Frequently Asked Questions. We have a lot of questions that you may want to know the answer to, and so you can search there and find a lot of good answers. And then contact us. If at any time you have any questions, please contact us. Our information is online, and it's also in this presentation. These slides will be available online, and we love to hear from you. So let me just dig right into the facts, because these are the most important things, the things that I have had questions about the most. The number one question asked is, do I have to use it? Yes, you do, but not totally, but we of course hope you will. If you get a request through the portal, then you have to access it through the portal, but you don't have to respond to that request through the portal. You can respond outside of the portal if you prefer. So if you have a set way that you handle GRAMA requests, then that's great, but if you will have to access the request through the portal. This is what it looks like, and I'll show you that a little bit later as well, where if you just want to respond to the request outside of the portal, you just click the button that says respond to request outside of portal. When does a time limit start for answering the request? The time limit starts when the request is opened by you, the records officer. That's when it starts, not when you get the email or when the requester submits the request. It's when you open the request. Or if the request is unopened for 10 business days, then I will consider it a denial, and I will bump it out of the system. But usually I hunt people down before then. My job is one of my jobs is to make sure that these things are being opened and answered. So if you don't open it, then I will find you. So how do you know if you have a request? You will get an email notification. If you want your email notifications to go to a specific email, then contact your analyst and they can make sure that we have the right email set up. Are the requests public? No, they are not public. GRAMA requests have a suggested designation of public, but it's up to every agency to classify their own records, and that includes GRAMA requests, which includes requests through the Open Records portal. The only people who can see these requests are the requester, the records officer, and then of course the web admin. We do discourage requesters from including sensitive information, but the requests are not public. Are the requests kept forever? No, they are not. They will be deleted after 2 years, and that is just following the general schedule, State Schedule 1-64. We haven't had the portal up for 2 years, so we haven't started deleting them yet, but they will be deleted. Can people abuse the system? The answer, not easily. People have to submit a request to each agency one at a time. They can't just go sending a bulk request to all the cities or all the counties. In the first month that we were open, we did have one person who submitted a request to every department, every state department. And that is the only such submission that we've had. And then, of course, each department denied the requester because it was for information that was already available online. So if you do believe that someone is spamming you or is abusing the system, contact me and we will look at it together and figure out a solution on what to do, because that is definitely not what we want to happen. Do you need to create an account? Yes. Excuse me. So you'll create a Utah Master Directory account. If you already have a public notice website account, then you've already created a Utah Master Directory account, and that will work for the portal as well. And the portal will guide you through it just step by step. Excuse me a moment, I'm going to take a drink. Okay. So some tips for registering. Be sure to use the same email that we have on file. That's the one that we send emails to. If you're not sure what your email is, then email your analyst and they can let you know. Also, please use an individual work email address, not a generic work email. We update a lot of we can update your email in our system if you want, but we use your email as a key for a couple different points of access to our system. One is the certification test, one is the Open Records portal. So if there is a generic email that is being used, then it might give you errors, you might have problems logging in, it might already have a Utah Master Directory account connected to it. Let us know, we can look into it and make sure that it's working right. So if you're not sure that your account is, if you're wondering if it's already been connected to MDN account, you can go to login.utah.gov to verify the account details and see the emails connected to that account. And again, if you have any questions about this, just give us a call. We can walk you through it or let you know who you can contact that will be able to help you. So how does it work, this fantastic portal? So it's very simple. The requester goes to the website, they find the agency they want to submit a request to, they submit the request, then you are notified that the requester has submitted a request, and then you respond to the request however you see fit. So like I said, this is the portal, and users can come and click any one of these buttons to see those agencies. Users also have a search bar up here at the top. I don't, because I'm a records officer, but users do have that ability too. Then they come here and see all the different agencies. This is what the agency information looks like online. They'll just come up here where it says request records and click on that, and that will take them to the request form. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this basically follows the paper request forms. It's pretty much the same thing, just in digital format. So we do here say, please do not submit any confidential information. We have had confidential information submitted, of course, already, but we do try to discourage that. And they can state whether they are the subject of the record or have the right to view the information in the record. And of course, if they want a fee waiver, they can request that, or an expedited response, they can request that as well. And then we tell them that the GRAMA requests are public information. They can upload documents as well. That's a new feature. So if you have a document that people need to submit in order to view records, they can upload it. What you will see, and where you will spend most of your time, is on the records officer dashboard. So when you go in to your dashboard, you will see all these requests that you have. You click on a request and it will take you to the message detail page. And then so all the information is here. This page I'm going to go through in detail because you will spend a lot of time here, or need to know this information rather. So up at the top, we have the basic details, the title, the date that it's due, and remember the time starts when you click on it to open it. And then you can add fees in there. And once you add any fees, those will be displayed here. They'll add total up here. Just a note, you cannot, what's the word? You cannot accept fees through the portal. You can just list them to let the user know what the fees will be. And then, of course, the progress. So where you're at. The description will be just underneath that. It's usually longer than 2 lines, but this is just a test. So there's the description. And then additional information, if they want the fee waiver, that will show here. If they want the expedited request, that will show here. And then there's this more detail button. You can get the requester's name, email address and other information down. If you click on that, it will show. Then there are these buttons. Oh, just went over that. Okay, great. The print request, if you would like to print a request, you can do so there, and then respond to requests outside a portal. Like I said, if you want to handle the request not in the portal, you can do that there. So underneath that, you'll see here a little table, and each part of the request needs to be answered individually. So the expedited request you need to answer, the fee waiver needs to be answered, and the main request as well. You may need to approve or deny these separately. And so here you just click on whichever one you want to select, and that you will see the details for each underneath. So this right here is the information for the main request. You can see who is assigned to it. You can change who's assigned to it. It just with the records officers that you have assigned to your agency. The more detail here is the same actually as the more detail up above. It shows you the requester's name and email and such. One of the coolest parts about the portal is this little button right here, divide request into parts. So if you have a request that's actually 2 or 3 requests, or you need to approve part of it and deny another part of it, you can do that by dividing the request into different parts. And then each of those parts will show up in this table here, and you can respond to them separately. Down at the bottom, this is the action panel. This is where all the fun happens. And I'm going to go through each of these one by one so you can see what each one has. The approve, you can approve basically the same as you can offline, but you can also upload files, or if you have just an internet link that you would like to give to the person to show them where the records are, you can do that. You'll need to enter in a message, select how you're going to get the records to them, and then there are 2 buttons down here, approve and close. Each portion of the request needs to be closed in order for the entire request to be closed. So click approve and close, and then you can move to the next portion of the request. Or if that's the entire request, you can close the whole request. So click approve and close, and you're done, and it'll upload the file, or your files will be sent to the person or the URL. Anytime that you approve or deny a request, the requester gets an email with the message that you sent. If you deny the request, they also get a notification of the appeals process and what they need to do in order to appeal the denial. This information for the Chief Administrative Officer automatically fills in if it's there for the agency. This test agency didn't have a CAO, so it didn't fill in automatically. But if we have a CAO in the system, that'll fill in. You can write the denial here, and that note will be added to the appeals information. And then if you want someone else to receive a notification of the denial, like if you need to send it to your supervisor or someone else, you can add emails in here, and that will be sent as a BCC to that person. Okay, we have a question. What is the question?
If I accidentally approve and close, can I open it again, or will it not allow me to close if part of it is unanswered?
Yes, the question is, if I accidentally approve and close, can you reopen it? The answer is yes, and it's kind of funny about that. If you press approve, right now there's not actually a way to close this section, so then you can't close the entire request. If you click approve and close, there will be an option for you to reopen that portion. So if you need to reopen it, you can. So just click approve and close. That way you'll either be able to close the request if you are done, or you'll be able to reopen it if you're not done. And we're planning on simplifying this a little. and just making one button so you won't have to think about that sort of thing or worry about it. That's in the works. Very good question. Thank you. So the next tab is extraordinary circumstances. These are legislatively approved extraordinary circumstances that you can select from in order to add some time onto the request. So they're described here, and then it tells you what the time limit is that is added to, you can add to. So as soon as you select one of these extraordinary circumstances, you can come down here and select the date when the records will be available, or you'll make the decision. And the dates given to you will be determined by whichever option you pick. And then you can describe it here, and a message will be sent to the requester stating that these extraordinary circumstances have been applied to the request. There we go. Okay, so the referral screen. It's really cool. This doesn't actually send the request to another agency yet. We're working on that, hopefully, for the future. Right now, though, you can select a records officer or a government agency, or you can just kind of type in the referral. But you can select one of these, and the system will send a message to the user saying, you need to send your request to this agency. Also, if the records do not exist, you can click this does not exist referral, and then put any explanation there that you would like. Excuse me. So fees. Fees are super exciting. You can add fees in here, and what I like about it is you can do it by quantity. So these ones, if you have copies, you can put in, say I have 25 pages and they're 5 cents each, and you can put them in and they will show up here and be added to the total at the top of the page. This is the total at the top of the page, and when you click on that total, you will be brought to this page where you see all the different fees for the request in one place. So those are the fees. The next tab is Contact Requester. This is basically just an email. Yeah, there's not really much more to say about that. Just an email, sends them an email. Then under the other tab, we have some really cool little things here for you to use. The first is tasks. Tasks are not only just so you can keep track of things you need to do, but also so you can keep track of billable hours. So when you add a task, you can put in the billable rate, say maybe $20 an hour or however much. And then once you have added that task, you can go in and state how long it took to perform that task, and that will automatically be added to the fee total as well. The next thing under the other tab is the documents. You can upload documents here. If a user uploads documents, this is where they will come to. And we're working on making this hopefully appear a little so you can see it more visibly, but the documents are here. You can upload. Actually, I haven't tested how many you can upload, so I don't want to say you can upload as many as you want, but you can upload files here. All right, the next one is notes. You can add notes. Just if you need any sort of notes, you can add it under the other tab. You can also specify whether you want the requester to see the note. So if you want the note to be visible to them, you can check a box. Otherwise, you can leave it unchecked and it will not be visible to them. It's just visible to you. And then last of all, there's the log. So every action taken to and performed to this request is here on the log. You can see who did what and what time. And that is pretty much the request in a nutshell. I'm sure you will get more familiar with it as you receive requests. If any of you would like to receive a test request so that you can play around with this a little, you can email me and I will send you a test request so you can just experiment a little and get more familiar with it. I know I really learn things a lot better when I do it myself. So let us know. We will send you a test request. So in the future, we are going to have these fantastic things available. So we're working on customizable fields so that if you have specific information you need, like the mother's name or father's name, you'll be able to add that. We're looking into customizable fee schedules because a lot of agencies just have fee schedules, and we can add those to make your life a little easier there. The ability to collect fees, I'm not sure when that'll come. It's kind of a dream right now, but in the future, someday. Additional reporting tools so that you can find out more analytics on your portal use. And then if you want to use the portal as your main source of just keeping track of all your grammar requests, we are working on a way to manually enter requests that you receive outside of the portal so you can keep track of all of them through the portal, even if they weren't submitted that way. Are there any questions? Hopefully, if you have questions, you've been typing them in the chat box as we go along. So we do want to know if you have special records request needs or need specific forms. If you're using an online request system already, then we would like to know that too, because we are developing an API so that we can hook right up to other online systems. Let us know if you have questions. Let us know if you have suggestions. And of course, let us know if you like it. We really appreciate feedback of every kind, and especially if we actually get something right, we love it to hear that. So next I'm going to talk about two more things. One is online records, and that's going to be brief, and the other is the dashboard. Online records, we are very excited about this. When you're logged into the portal, you will see a link at the top of the page that says online records, and it's grayed out because it is not quite ready, but we are working on a lot of fantastic features for you. So these are some of the things that we are going to do. We're going to have a place for records officers to view agency information online and series information, so you can see what series you have with us. There will be a way to report new series to us or edit or revise existing series information. There you can upload local ordinances, and we will also have a way to actually upload documents via the portal. So if you have electronic records that you would like to send, then you'll be able to do that here. And like I said, it's a ton of work making all this stuff, but we are working on it, and we're very excited to be developing all these things. So the records officer dashboard is up already. You can view it when you go on the portal. You just click dashboard. If you log in and you do not see the dashboard, please let us know. We have had some people who've not been able to see it, and it usually is just because of email issues, the email used. But if you can't see that dashboard button, let us know, and we will figure out what's going on. So records officers should be able to see the dashboard. If you're just in your agency as a chief administrative officer, you may not be able to see it. So it's for records officers right now. When you click on the dashboard, and then click on the training tab, you'll see these different options here. Certification you can now do online. You don't have to email anyone or get a specific link. You can just go online and do it at any time. This is what the page looks like, the certification page. We have two tests, and I believe Kendra is going to talk a little bit more about these tests, but we have two tests that you can take now. You can view the test materials online or just start the test whenever you want. Your scores will show up down at the bottom. Oh, wait, I made highlights for this. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so you can see your status up at the top of the page. If you are certified, there will be a green check mark there. If you are not certified, there will be a big red X there. And if you're certified but going to expire soon, there will be a yellow exclamation point. Your renewal date shows there as well, so you can see when you need to renew by. And then, like I said, the tests there. You can see your test history, and you can reprint your certificate at any time. Also, we do show the questions missed for the most recent test. I actually took this until I got 100, so there aren't any questions missed. But if you do miss questions, as I did on every single other test, it will show up here for the most recent tests, and you can review the questions that you missed and figure out what the correct answer is. So that is very exciting. We also have register for training online now. Well, in the portal, slightly different than it was. So you can view all of the training sessions coming up. You can sort by the date, location, class name, any of these factors. If you just click up here, it will sort by that facet. And when you want to register, you just click the register for this class, and poof, you are registered. If you want to withdraw, you just click withdraw from this class. Very simple, very easy. Hopefully that will be helpful. One other feature we have under the dashboard, under my account, is my profile. So you can go in and change your name, your address, your title, email, phone number, any of that. You can change that at any time, and that will change in the system as well. So in the future, we are working on, of course, more features for the portal, the dashboard as well. So we're hoping to be able to implement these. You'll be able to request training. You'll be able to verify records officers. So CAOs will be able to verify records officers. You'll be able to update agency information or contact your archives analyst, and lots of other fun stuff. Do we have any questions? No, we're doing okay. Okay, great. And that is my point for questions. Again, if you do have any questions, please contact us at any point. And the analysts, your analysts would love to help you as well. And the transparency board is the kind of moving factor behind this. So if you have specific legislative concerns or would like to see something in the law, something changed, or bigger concerns, basically, than we are able to help you with, then I would encourage you to talk to the Transparency Board. They love hearing from people who are actually using these features and things that are in the law. And now, I believe that is all for my portion of the Open Records portal. And I will give the floor to Kendra, to Nova, just kidding, Nova Dubovic, and I guess I'll let her introduce herself. So just one moment while we switch out spots.
Okay, I just can't see it. Oh goodness, how does this work? Kendra. Renee. Oh. Okay, that's fine. That's all right. So this is down arrow too. Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you, Renee. My name is Nova Dubovic. I'm the Executive Secretary to the State Records Committee, and sitting next to me is Kendra Yates, who is the Records Analyst Section Manager. Today, we are excited to tell you about 2 new paths for Records Officer certification that is tailored for the duties and responsibilities you may or may not perform. Prior to this new initiative, there was only one way a records officer could certify annually, and that was by taking the Records Access, or better known as the GRAMA certification, whether you handled GRAMA requests or not. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and go over some basics of the responsibilities. Okay, so your responsibilities as a Chief Administrative Officer include establish records management program, appoint records officers, ensure that they certify annually. We're actually working off 2 computers right now, so bear with us as we get a flow for this. If you're an appointed records officer, some of the responsibilities that you may have regarding records include care and maintenance, scheduling and disposal, classification and designation, providing access, and preserving the records. You take a moment and take a look at the wording. So the State Archives, it recognizes that many governmental entities divide these responsibilities among different records officers. For example, some records officers are responsible for the care, maintenance, and scheduling of records, but not for classifying or providing access to records. And some records officers only classify records and respond to GRAMA requests. Most records officers have both responsibilities. One responsibility that can't be shared or distributed is certifying annually. And according to the Utah Code, every records officer must do this, except records officers of the legislature and courts. So up to now, there has been one certification option, online materials and testing designed to educate records officers regarding records access and the provisions of GRAMA. So if you've taken the test, you have seen this screen before. There are new paths to certification, a training that focuses on records access and a training that focuses on records management. Both certification tests will be available to every records officer, and they are both online right now. Records officers who are responsible only for GRAMA requests must take the records access certification test. Records officers who have only records management responsibilities, and we'll get a little bit more into that, Kendra's going to explain, and are not responsible for responding to GRAMA requests may certify by taking the records management certification test. And then 3, records officers who have both responsibilities may certify by taking the records access certification test the first time, and thereafter may certify by taking the records management and records access certification tests alternately every year. That is a tongue twister. Okay, so records access. The first path we will discuss is Record Access Certification Test, fondly known as GRAMA. If you are familiar with GRAMA, this will be a quick overview of the certification material. If you are not familiar with Records Access Certification, then this will provide an opportunity to compare and contrast and decide which certification track most represents your duties and responsibilities. The first track is for records officers who are responsible only for GRAMA requests. You must take the Records Access Certification test. If your responsibilities include responding to GRAMA requests, classifying records, and disclosing public, private, protected, and controlled records, then you will need to take this particular certification. It is important before beginning to take the test to download the statute, which is the Government Records Access and Management Act, again, GRAMA, and the training manual provided on the Archives website or the Open Records portal. And again, this presentation is just an overview of the test material to provide you a general idea of what is involved to certify as a GRAMA responder and if it pertains to you. For a more comprehensive GRAMA training experience, it is highly recommended to attend an in-person refresher class on an annual basis, and we do hold those here at the Archives, and we do regional training, because this law is very complex and not easily to interpret. Plus, new provisions are added every year when the legislature meets in January, so it's a good idea to attend annual training to learn about the latest provisions that may apply to you. Okay, so GRAMA certification test is broken down into 6 sections. They reflect the contents of the law. The test can be retaken as many times as needed to obtain a passing score. However, it must be noted that the last 4 sections in the law you do not need to know to pass the test, but it is highly advised to review and become familiar with those sections on your own. Before we officially begin reviewing the certification material, let's take a moment and define GRAMA. So GRAMA is the Government Records Access and Management Act. It was passed in 1992. It's a very comprehensive law for government records in Utah. It is Utah's basic records law, and it applies to the records of both state and local governments in the same way that the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, that is commonly known as, applies to the records of the federal government. In fact, in many ways, GRAMA is parallel to FOIA. The law provides guidelines for disclosure and restriction of records and has comprehensive records classification structure. There are 4 classifications. It's public, private, protected, and controlled. And the law further states that when access is governed by some other statute, that statute takes precedence and or complements GRAMA. So if you take a look at the beginning of the statute in Section 1, General Provisions, the legislature intent is defined. And it informs us that the purpose of this act is to promote the public's right to easy access to public records and at the same time to prevent abuse of confidentiality by governmental entities by permitting the confidential treatment of some records. Its purpose is also to provide guidelines for both disclosures and restrictions that are based on the equitable weighing of relevant interests, which are consistent with the nationwide standards and practices. A further stated purpose of this act is to establish fair and reasonable records management practices. And there are times when appropriate restrictions must be implemented. For example, driver's license test. Disclosing the answers to the public before administering the test would be counterproductive to the purpose of administering the test. And therefore, the governmental entity would classify that test as protected. So that kind of gives you an idea of what that means. So after the legislative intent is defined in GRAMA, in general provisions, there's a list of 30 definitions in alphabetical order. These are words that you will find throughout the law that are used in a legal capacity and need to be defined to understand the legislature's intent. Some examples is the use of the word person. You're going to see it throughout GRAMA, and you wonder, what does it mean? Well, it means an individual, nonprofit, or profit corporation, partnership, sole proprietorship, business organization, or any combination of those above. Another one that kind of trips people up is the classification or derivative of that is declassify, and it's essentially determining whether a record or the contents within the record is public, private, controlled, or protected, or exempt from disclosure. So that just gives you an example. The rest of this section outlines and defines what is public, private, controlled record. However, the more in-depth definitions, you will find those in Section 3 and in Section 4 and Section 2. Also within Section 1 is confidentiality agreements. This pertains to contracts provided to you by private entities. Records of security measures, these are not subject to GRAMA. Disclosing a password or combination would not be a wise act. And then lastly, within that section is a certification of records officers. And this will be addressed, this was addressed a little earlier in the introduction, and Kendra will go over a bit more in her portion. So Section 2 is access to records. It's Part 2 in the law, and it delineates access rights to the government records, who has the right to inspect records, what restrictions exist, and who has rights to access restricted records. In addition, Part 2 specifies what fees are properly assessed, the time limits to respond to requests, and the appeals record process. This is probably the most important section for records officers to understand and apply if you respond to GRAMA requests. So, the right to inspect. The access to records section defines who has the right to inspect a record. And basically, every person has the right to inspect records and receive copies during normal working hours. Government entity is not required to create a record unless it doesn't interfere with government duties and responsibilities and the requester agrees to a fee. And government may not use physical form, electronic or otherwise, in which a record is stored to hinder the rights of a person to inspect and receive a copy of a record. So disclosure of records. It also identifies who you can disclose records to. Private records are disclosed to the subject of the record, parent or legal guardian, or someone with the power of attorney. Controlled records are released to physicians, psychologists, certified social workers, insurance providers, or producers. A signed acknowledgement of the terms of disclosure must also be provided. So you can't just give it away. You have to sign acknowledgement. Protected records are provided to the person who submitted the record, who has a power of attorney or court ordered. A submitted record could be a copy of a big contract you submitted, proposals, applications, or other information you have been required to submit to a governmental entity. And then lastly, do not release a record without verifying the identity of the requester. That is so important. Okay, so when a requester submits a GRAMA request, it must be a written request that contains the following information. It must have their name, a mailing address, a telephone number if one is available, and a description of the record with as much specificity as possible of what they are requesting. In addition, it must be submitted to the governmental entity that prepares, owns, retains, or received the record. When a records officer receives a GRAMA request, he or she has 10 business days after receipt to respond. And we broke it down into 4 ways to respond. You can approve and provide the record. That's easy enough. Deny partial or whole access to a record. Notify the requester the governmental entity does not maintain the record and provide a reference, if it's known, who does maintain the record. Or notify the requester that you are claiming extraordinary circumstances. Now, there are 8 extraordinary circumstances that are listed in the law, and they are very specific with designated timeframes. If you do claim extraordinary circumstances, you must notify the requester within the 10 business days in the law that they have the right to appeal the extraordinary circumstance claim. That's if they disagree with the reason or the date that the records would be provided by you. And this is just a quick glance. This is just a chart of the 8 extraordinary circumstances. You may notice quite a few have reasonable time, and there are a few that specify the extended time frames. For example, if you look about 3/4 of the way down, legal counsel to review the records before disclosure. You would notify the requester of the extraordinary circumstance claim and state your office needs 5-day extension from the original request date. It is important that you respond and send the notice within those 10 business days provided by the law, because again, the requester has the right to appeal to the Chief Administrative Officer within those 30 days. So also in Section 2, it outlines fees, denials, sharing records, and subpoenas. So fees. It discusses fees in detail and how to access and apply them. The governmental entity may charge a reasonable fee to cover the cost of providing a record, and it is important for political subdivisions to establish a fee schedule to provide the public on how much it will cost to provide those records. And GRAMA highly encourages government entities to fulfill a request without charge, and is encouraged to do so when it determines the release would benefit the public or the requester's rights. And that is mainly if the requester's rights are directly impacted. It also includes if the requester is impecunious, which means they can't afford the fee. And if that's the case, each governmental entity will have to make their own determination whether or not the person is impecunious or have them provide some type of proof. So for denials, how to properly notify a requester of a denial. This is in Section 205, and it outlines what information is needed to be on the notification letter. A denial notification letter should contain the statement, right to appeal, the record's description and corresponding citation that are being denied, and if there's any court ruling or federal statute or federal regulation that may apply to the citation as to why they are being denied. Time limits for appealing to the Chief Administrative Officer, which is 30 days per the law, and the name and the business address of the Chief Administrative Officer. And I just provided a simple eye chart here, a little GRAMA process flow chart, and it starts out with the records officer who receives the GRAMA request, has 10 business days to make a determination, and you can see the different determinations that can be made. Then the governmental entity notifies the requester whether it has, oh, I've got a pointer. Okay, notifies the requester of the governmental entity's decision. So if the governmental entity approves, then records are provided, you're done. If it's a denial, then you go to the next step, which you notify the requester the right to appeal a decision to the chief administrative officer or their designee, and then you would provide a written response and description, a citation, the right to appeal, and then the 30-day calendar. So this is just a quick flow chart to kind of see the process. Okay, sharing records. Sharing records with other governmental agencies. A governmental entity may provide a record that is private, controlled, or protected to another governmental entity if it falls within the perimeters outlined in GRAMA. And this section in the law is quite long and extensive and very detailed. And the training manual, if you download it, it's been simplified. But if there are any questions, please refer to the statute, but it is a very detailed section. And then subpoenas. Subpoenas and other methods of discovery are not GRAMA requests, and that's a stomping point, and must be processed completely differently. A subpoena is a judicial process, and GRAMA request is an administrative process. A person can request the same records under both processes. For example, a requester may submit a GRAMA to the police department for records on their case, and the police department may have responsive records to that requester that the lawyer has not found pertinent to the case, and so therefore would not be in the lawyer's file, but would be at the police department. And as long as there isn't any restrictions, you can go ahead and provide those records to the requester under GRAMA. Even if the requester has received those same records under discovery, it is not considered a duplicate response or fulfill of records. And there is a records committee decision that pertains directly to this difference between the subpoenas and GRAMA, and you can take a look at it on our website under State Records Committee, and it is case number 14-04 if you're interested. Okay, so section 3 is classifications, and it's an in-depth section covering records classifications. And of course, there are 4 classifications: public, private, controlled, and protected. And records are either public and available for everyone to inspect and copy, or records are one of the other 3, which is private, controlled, and protected under GRAMA. And of course, disclosure would be restricted or access governed by some other court rule or a state statute, or federal regulation. Public records can be open meetings, minutes, financial records, initial contact reports, government contracts, and all records not specifically restricted in the law. Kind of remember it this way: all records are public unless otherwise expressly stated in the law, and this is not an exhaustive list either. So to assist in understanding what a private and controlled record, because it took me a while to wrap my mind around it, think of them as about individuals, but disclosure restrictions are vastly different. So a private record, their personal data and information on a person, if released to someone other than that person, would be clearly an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. A controlled record pertains to an individual's medical data, and if released to that individual, it could be detrimental to the individual or to the safety of others around them. And it's also important to note, releasing that information could be a violation of medical ethics. So protected records, this is a fun one. There's 65 protected records listed. And the legislature every year continues to add more protected records to the list. As of 2015, they added one more that made it 65. And this is just an example of some of the protected records that are in the statute. You have bids for contracts, trade secrets that would fall under proprietary information. Someone wouldn't want that information released to their competitors. Test questions, we talked about driver's license tests. That would be counterproductive to disclose the test questions before taking the test. Draft, unless otherwise classified as public. Attorney-client privilege. And think about this way: releasing protected records could interfere with the government process, such as audits, exams, investigations, or trials. And for the most part, the list of protected records makes common sense after you review them all. So section 4. Stranger. Not all records officers work with appeals or have the opportunity to sit in on a committee, a state records committee hearing. However, it's important to familiarize yourself with the process because it impacts records access decisions made at your level and those at the Chief Administrative Officer's level. The requester has the right to appeal to the governmental entity's decision. We talked about that from Section 2, Access to Records. And appeals, this Section 4 appeals outlines those provisions. The first appeal must go to the Chief Administrative Officer or the designee of the governmental entity. And a requester may appeal 30 days after the notification of denial. In addition to the denial, the requester may also appeal unreasonable denial of a fee waiver request, claims of extraordinary circumstances, if the requester believes it is an unreasonable time frame or reason for not providing those records, and if the governmental entity failed to respond within the time frame required by the statute, which had been the 10 days. Once the Chief Administrative Officer responded, the next level is to the local appeals board if there is one established. If not, the Chief Administrative Officer's decision may be appealed to the State Records Committee or a district court, and that is to the requester's choice. So here's another flow chart that deals with the Chief Administrative Officer's responsibilities. So the Chief Administrative Officer or designee has 5 business days to respond once receipt of the appeal, and they determine by approval, access deny whole or part, or they may not respond at all, which affirms a denial. They notify the requester of the governmental entity decision, which if they approve, then you're done, provide the records. A denial, they go on to the next step. And they would notify the requester the right to appeal. Within that notification, you would provide the written response, the right to appeal, 30-day calendars, 30 days to file an appeal, the name, business, and address of the executive secretary, the State Records Committee, or if it's a local appeals board that they need to appeal to, then you would provide that information. Once they have appealed to local appeals board and the local appeals board has made their determination, then the requester can appeal to the State Records Committee or the district court, depending on which route they want to go. And this does not include all of the other intricate and complexities of GRAMA as far as extraordinary circumstances and business confidentiality. This is just a quick overview of a very traditional appeals process. And what I did here is kind of broke it down into text. The process starts with the requester submits the GRAMA request. The governmental entity has 10 business days to respond. You notify the requester in writing the right to appeal within 30 days. The Chief Administrative Officer, the designee, they have 5 business days to respond. And then they notify the requester in writing to appeal within 30 days to one of these 3, local appeals board if one is established, or to the State Records Committee and district court. Okay, so Section 5 and 6. Due to limited time, we're not going to go into great detail with Section 5. Section 5 is part of 7 in the law and contains information on political subdivisions and their ability to adopt ordinances and policies to comply with the statute. It also outlines what information we should written into the ordinance or policies to include the new statute requirements for the local appeals board. A political subdivision may also establish its own reasonable response time and time limits for appeals. If you write ordinance and policies, it's very important to take a look at this section and become familiar with it. Section 6 in the manual, the training manual, lists 4 parts not included in the records access certification. These sections might pertain to your duties, so it's important to review the sections, which are the State Records Committee duties and configurations, collection of information and accuracy of records. This is a provision that identifies the rights of individuals. Remedies. This provision defines criminal penalties and liabilities associated with violations under GRAMA, and public associations. This section states that public associations are subject to the act in specific circumstances. One example that they have in there is this section was added for the 2002 Olympic Winter Games Committee. So, do we have any questions? Just like to reiterate that as a records officer, if you perform any of the duties mentioned in the records access certification that we just went over, and your responsibility is to respond to GRAMA requests, then you must take the records access certification test. It is a requirement that records officers who work with GRAMA requests be familiar and understand the Government Records and Access Management Act. If what is contained in the records access certification, GRAMA, does not fall into the realm of your responsibilities and duties as a records officer, then let's take a look at the new path to the records management certification. And this might be a better option and can be taken in lieu of the records access GRAMA certification. I'm going to turn this over to Kendra if nobody has any questions.
Good morning. My name is Kendra Yates. I am the Records Analyst Manager here at the State Archives. And as Nova mentioned, there are two paths now to certification. So we created a new training that focuses on records management because records officers who are not assigned the duty of responding to GRAMA requests felt that the records access and GRAMA training is irrelevant to what they do every day. That usually happens in larger agencies where they have quite a few records officers assigned and they divvy it out. And so there are some that are not allowed to even respond to requests. So, but they still had to certify. So by creating a second certification training and test that concentrates on records management, records officers not handling GRAMA requests can comply with the law that says they have to certify annually, but in a way that benefits them and feels relevant. However, if you respond to requests and you maintain records, then both tests can be taken in alternating years. So one of the biggest challenges as we developed the Records Management Essentials training was deciding what should and should not be in the new training. There is a plethora of literature about records management best practices. Although we felt obligated to discuss the legal aspects of the records management, we also wanted to talk about the practical benefits to you and to your agency, and we wanted to offer helpful and accomplishable instructions, not just lofty ideals. So I'll just give you a brief overview. The first section of the training focuses on government records laws, both GRAMA and the Public Records Management Act, or PRMA, as we like to call it. These laws contain definitions, a warning, and descriptions of duties associated with maintaining government records and who those duties belong to. So the definitions in GRAMA answer questions like these. They can help you determine whether something is a record or not, and can explain what record series, record copies, and retention schedules are. They also, PRMA in this case, provides warnings by making it clear that records are property of the state, meaning that their maintenance is governed by statute and is not left up to the discretion of government employees. The law specifically says, do not intentionally mutilate, destroy, damage, or dispose of records contrary to a properly adopted retention schedule. And to break the law is a Class B misdemeanor. This can be positively stated as records must be maintained and must remain accessible for the duration of their approved retention periods. The other thing that PRMA goes into is that it outlines the legal responsibilities and duties of governmental entities. We already discussed this at the beginning, that chief administrative officers and records officers have specific duties. The State Archives, or the Division of Archives and Records Service, also has duties specified in PRMA, and that includes administering the state's archives and records management programs, establishing standards and developing training, preparing retention schedules, and serving as the official repository for historical records. So Section 2 of the training focuses on principles of establishing a records management program. Not so much the legal requirements, but the business case, the benefits that you and your agency will enjoy if you successfully implement a records management program. And then Section 3 of the training focuses on 10 practical steps that can help you implement retention schedules in order to better manage your records. Those 10 steps include finding and understanding your retention schedules, inventorying your records, and getting staff feedback on how they are actually managed, and then comparing the reality with what is in the retention schedules so that you can update your retention schedules or your practices. The final steps are about educating your colleagues and enlisting their aid, and about organizing your records and then transferring or destroying those that should go. The most important thing that we took into consideration as we developed this training is what I like to call points of pain. These are questions that we receive or just gaps in understanding that become evident to us as we assist agencies. I'd like to cover just a few of those common misconceptions here. One clarification that the training makes is to explain the two types of retention schedules. One type is general retention schedules, which are created for common record groups, such as accounts payable records or meeting minutes. General retention schedules have already been approved by the State Records Committee, or the SRC, and are available for immediate use. On the left of your screen here, you'll see a list of categories for general retention schedules. They're online. When a governmental entity has records that are not described in a general retention schedule, or if they want to keep the records for more or less time than is specified by the general retention schedule, then they, with the help of the records analyst at the State Archives, can submit a series-specific retention schedule to the State Records Committee for approval. Once a series-specific retention schedule has been approved, it carries the same mandate for compliance as general retention schedules do. So on the right of your screen here is a retention and classification report for a series-specific retention schedule. Another point of pain that the training addresses is the significance of a record copy. Because records can be duplicated in order to create reference copies, access copies, backup copies, preservation copies, etc., the law isolates the legal requirements for maintaining the records to only the record copy. Your agency is in charge of choosing which copy is the record copy. But at the same time, they are committing to maintaining the record copy for the duration of the scheduled retention, and then must manage all of the copies of the record and preserve the record copy in a way that makes it accessible and authentic for the duration of the retention, and then disposes of the record according to the scheduled disposition. So there are common misunderstandings about what records are. If you don't print it off and hold it in your hands, is it still a record? Believe it or not, some people are confused about that. Social media content that relates to government business is a record and must be treated as such. Emails and instant messages that relate to work are records. Even personal emails that are sent and received using your work email become subject to discovery if the courts request your emails. This is why we suggest that you use a personal account for personal email, or forward personal emails to a personal account and delete them from your work account. Also, information in database systems are records. This is an especially prevalent misconception. So just for a little more detail, people sometimes use the term database when referring to the information itself. A database system is like a cupboard used to store and organize documents or to aggregate tables of data. But a database is not a records management system, and it is not IT's responsibility to ensure that the records are retained correctly. It is mandated through law that each state governmental agency establish records retention schedules for any electronic records created or received in an electronic transaction. The data held in an agency's database documents, among other things, business functions and transactions, and may therefore be records. Records officers need to have an understanding of what information is contained in their databases and how to manage it. Part of managing electronic records requires establishing plans for reformatting, plans for migrating the data, especially if the retention period is 10 years or longer, and plans for record storage in order to store it less expensively once the records are no longer accessed frequently. Another source of confusion that we run into with records officers is understanding the two different facilities that the State Archives manages and the very different functions that they serve. So one facility is the State Records Center, which is an offsite storage facility in Clearfield. This is for inactive records, meaning that they are used less than once a month, but their retention has not yet been met. There is no cost to the agency for storage at this record center, and custody of the records is retained by the governmental entity. So the agency is responsible for access and maintenance of those records. The agency may request records from the record center and then return the records to the record center when they are finished with them. On the other hand, the State Archives, located in downtown Salt Lake City, is for records of historical value that have met their retention and that have a disposition of transfer to the State Archives or permanent. You will send them to our building downtown in Salt Lake City, and at that time the custody of the records is held by the Utah Division of Archives and Records Service, which means the State Archives becomes responsible for preserving, caring for, storing, and providing access to the records. These records are available for use in the Archives Research Center and online in many cases, but cannot be recalled to the agency that created the records originally. Finally, a common misconception among records officers has to do with an essential part of implementing a records retention program, that of destroying all records, regardless of format, that have a disposition of destroy when their retention has been met. The retentions stated on retention schedules do not only indicate the minimum amount of time that a record should be kept, they also indicate the point at which a record should be disposed of. And all copies of a record should be destroyed at the same time as the record copy if they have not been destroyed sooner, regardless of format. So cleaning up databases is an important part of that. Our hope in providing this second path to certification is that we can make your job easier by providing relevant and practical guidance. We would love to know in what other ways we can make your job easier. Do you have any questions or suggestions for us? If so, in the future, if you have any questions for us about managing your records, feel free to contact us. Ray Gifford is the records analyst for state agencies and education. Lorianne Outerkirk is the records analyst for local agencies, law enforcement, and the Department of Health. And I am the records analyst for elected state agencies, courts, and legislature. And then Rebecca Shaw is our records analyst that creates and updates our general retention schedules. So please let us know if you have any questions. I'm going to turn it over to Renee Wilson.
Okay, thanks everyone for attending and for watching and listening. These materials will be available on our website on the event materials page, and this video will be available as well on our YouTube page. So we hope you have had a good time, and we will now end the Hangout. Thanks everyone, have a good day.